All right, here we go. The last chapter in Lehi in the Desert, and then we're on to the world of the Jaredites, which will be cool. This is going to be awesome. All right, last time we were talking about the courtroom scene of all the information that we did. God, I love that. That was so fun. Anyways, some simple tests. The present treatment of the Lehi story leaves much to be desired. We can afford to crave the reader's indulgence for using the term Jew too loosely or engaging in rather fuzzy speculation on language. But if only a fraction of our information has been sound, First Nephi cannot possibly be explained on the grounds of mere coincidence. To illustrate this, let the reader make a simple test. Let him sit down to write a history of life, let us say, in Tibet, in the middle of the 11th century AD. Let him construct a story wholly on the basis of what he happens to know right now about Tibet in the 11th century, that will fairly represent what was known about ancient Erebus in 1830, for example, that there was such a place and that it was very mysterious and romantic. In composing your Tibetan fantasy, you will enjoy one great advantage. Since the canvas is an absolute blank, you're free to fill it with anything that strikes your fancy. So you should have no trouble getting smoothly launched into your narrative, which Miss Brodie seems to think was the only obstacle confronting the author of the Book of Mormon. So I found this out because I read this just slightly earlier, and then my memory storage was full again, so I figured out what it was. But anyways, so Fawn Brodie was born in 1915 and died in like 1981 or 2 or 3. So she's right in the middle of all this. I think she was a member of the church because she was born in Utah, but then she later wrote No Man Knows My History. And you'll see here in a moment, it Hugh Nibley basically said, no ma'am, that's not history, it's his rebuttal book. But she's like, oh, it's no problem. All he had to do was just start writing. Which Miss Brodie seems to think was the only obstacle confronting the author of the Book of Mormon. But there will be other obstacles. For in your chronicle of Old Tibet, we must insist you scrupulously observe a number of annoying conditions. 1. You must never make any absurd, impossible, or contradictory statements. 2. When you are finished, you must make no changes in the text. The first edition must stand forever. 3. You must give out that your smooth narrative is not fiction, but true, nay, sacred history. 4. You must invite the ablest Orientalists to examine the text with care and strive diligently to see that your book gets into the hands of all those most eager and most competent to expose every flaw in it. The author of this Book of Mormon observes, the author of the Book of Mormon, he has author in quotes because we all know Joseph Smith translated it, but the author of the Book of Mormon observes all these terrifying rules most scrupulously. In your Tibetan epic, you might get something right by happy accident once in a while, but don't expect it. You may console yourself by turning to any good historical novel dealing with the ancient world and marking with a red pencil every anachronism, incongruity, and inaccuracy in the book. The result is carnage, but be merciful. To realize what difficulties confront the creative historian, one has to but contemplate the laborious production of the Book of Mormon's latest critics. It was all too easy for the present author, lacking the unfair advantage of either wit or learning, to show where Mrs. Brodie, in composing a history of events but 100 years old, contradicted herself again and again. Since the others, more diligent and more astute, have shown how evidence has suffered at the hands of such a historian, remember, she's the one who falsely wrote about Joseph Smith and falsely wrote about Thomas Jefferson. She was the one who started the whole Thomas Jefferson raped a slave of his. No, he didn't. It was likely his brother, just because But she ignores that because she just says, it happened at this time. Well, Thomas Jefferson was over in France. You want to know who was around? The philandering brother that everyone knew was a philanderer. So, since others more diligent and astute have shown how evidence has suffered at the hands of such a historian, who cites as her star witness against the prophet's character, a court record that never existed. What he's specifically referring to, we refer to the Hugh Nibley's, no ma'am, that's not history. Salt Lake Bookcraft, 1946. The definitive handling of the court records is in Dr. Francis W. Kirkham's A New Witness for Christ in America, enlarged second edition, Zion Publishing. She was not scrupulous by any means in her recounting of history. It was literally just to push an agenda. This is a fight that's been going on since long before I was born, and probably just before my parents were born. I mean, this... Anyway. A Victor Hugo or an Anatole France can tell a convincing story when he is near his own land and time, but let any writer, even the most learned, slip back a couple thousand years and a few thousand miles around the globe, and he finds himself in a treacherous terrain from which the only escape lies in taking to the wings of fantasy. It is not particular details so much as the general background and atmosphere of the stories that oblige Messrs, M-E-S-S-R-S, a proper name, White and Douglas to wink knowingly and tell us it's all in fun. Any handbook of Greek or Roman antiquities can supply a writer with all the accurate detail he can possibly use, but no writer has succeeded in integrating a mass of such stuff into a simple, natural, and flawless whole. For example, just read Jules Verne, right? 12 Weeks in a Balloon, he got right. He called that Lake Victoria was the source of the Nile. They didn't know that at the time. The other such things, though, he didn't know about Antarctica. He didn't know there was an entire continent on the very south pole of the world. So he had Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea claim the South Pole as a bunch of small islands that were down there. Anyway, like he says, you can go off in flights of fantasy if you want and have it sound realistic until actual credulity is applied. Anyways, Thornton Wilder and Naomi Mitchin neatly avoid the pitfalls of historical reconstruction by concentrating on such timeless things as mountains, seas, and human emotions, and so make their tales convincing. But Nephi enjoys no such artistic luxuries or immunities. It is history he is writing, and he imparts his information in such simple, effortless, and matter-of-fact discourse that the reader easily overlooks the vast amount of details that is woven into the natural and uncomplicated pattern, which is true. And what's also funny, and, well, let me finish the sentence here. What writer of historical fiction has ever remotely approached such an achievement? I mean, think of all those details that we covered in this that applied. And not only applied, but the information in between the lines that were directly expressed that he just assumes everybody knows because it's so obvious, right? It's like when you cook and I say, take 3 eggs and, crack them into the pan. You know what an egg is. Did I specify what type of egg, though? I didn't say chicken egg. I said egg. For all you know, if you came back upon my recipe 1,000 years later from a different atmosphere in a different language, and I didn't specify ostrich egg, or I didn't specify quail egg, which may be the common bird over there, everyone will go, this recipe sucks. My quail eggs, there's hardly enough egg in this recipe. A chicken, what in the world is a chicken, right? When you are far removed by time and place, a lot of what is omitted in the information is just as valuable to prove its correctness. Like Nephi did not sit there and say, yeah, I put on his armor, and in the deafness of night, no one could tell that I was Laban, and so it was easy to impersonate him to go and get the plates. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say that at all. He just says I donned his armor and his sword, and he assumed that because I had his armor and sword that I was Laban. He didn't say how dark it was and so no one could tell, because it was obvious to him. It was so blatantly obvious because, it's not, we don't sit there and say 3 chicken eggs in recipes. We say just add 3 eggs. He says, I donned the armor. We were at night. He doesn't say how dark it was or how easy it was to fool people because of the darkness. That was just assumed. And there's so many other assumptions that he has. And with the timing of everything in their travels to fit exactly what is needed to have what they need when they need it in the way that God was providing for them on their journey toward the final end of the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, it's incredible. So, and he just, like he says, it's effortlessly just, it's just thrown in there. I mean, that's what it was. And yet, for us, it's just like, oh, it's all part of the story. But anyone who's a historian and literalist are like, wait, what? What is all these details? And then we see how that's, yeah, absolutely. Makes perfect sense. But you try and do that in your Tibetan novel that you're going to make. And, yeah, I think I would get a heck of a lot wrong. Anyway. But haven't we been decidedly partial in dealing with Lehi? Of course we have. We are the counsel for the defense. Our witnesses have all been of our own choosing, but no one can deny that they are competent and unprejudiced. We invite the prosecution to examine them. To date, they have not done so, but instead have brought their own witnesses into court, up-to-date intellectuals, who can tell us just exactly what the accused was thinking when he wrote the Book of Mormon. Such evidence is not evidence at all. It is bad science, bad history, and even bad newspaper reporting, and would be rejected by any court in the land. But it might impress the half-educated jury that and that is its purpose. We can best explain the new trend in Book of Mormon criticism by a little parable. I think he's specifically going after Fawn Brody. Oh, we can tell exactly what Joseph Smith was thinking. I think she has that narration in her book. And how can you sit there and say you know what Joseph Smith was actually thinking? Or what, if I understand right, because I have not read her stuff, but from what the quotes have come by, from like Ward Radio and stuff, she was talking about narrations among the Joseph Smith family that she wasn't there for, and nor is there any evidence of it in any journals whatsoever. And so, how do you get some mind reading and some reenactment of history that doesn't exist? It's a bit worrisome when someone tries to do that. Anyways, so the parable. A young man once long ago claimed he had found a large diamond in his field as he was plowing. He put the stone on display to the public free of charge, and everyone took sides. Oh, I love this. I think I've heard this one before. Anyways, he put the stone on display to the public free of charge, and everyone took sides. A psychologist showed, by citing some famous case studies, that the young man was suffering from a well-known form of delusion. A historian showed that other men have also claimed to have found diamonds in fields and been deceived. A geologist proved that there was no diamonds in the area, but only quartz. The young man had been fooled by a quartz. When asked to inspect the stone itself, the geologist declined with a weary, tolerant smile and kindly shake of the head. An English professor showed that the young man, in describing his stone, used the very same language that others had used in describing uncut diamonds. He was, therefore, simply speaking the common language of his time. A sociologist showed that only 3 out of 177 florists' assistants in 4 major cities believed the stone was genuine. A clergyman wrote a book to show that it was not the young man, but someone else who had found the stone. Finally, an indigent jeweler named Snight pointed out that since the stone was still available for examination, the answer to the question of whether it was a diamond or not had absolutely nothing to do with who found it, or whether the finder was honest or sane, or who believed him, or whether he would know a diamond from a brick, or whether diamonds had ever been found in fields, or whether people had ever been fooled by quartz or glass, but was to be answered simply and solely by putting the stone to certain well-known tests for diamonds. Experts on diamonds were called in. Some of them declared it genuine. The others made nervous jokes about it and declared that they could not very well jeopardize their dignity and reputations by appearing to take the thing too seriously. To hide the bad impression thus made, someone came out with a theory that the stone was really a synthetic diamond, very skillfully made, but a fake just the same. The objection to this is that the production of a good synthetic diamond 120 years ago would have been an even more remarkable feat than finding of a real one. I love that parable. It's so good. The moral of this story is that the testimony brought out by the prosecution, however learned, has been to date entirely irrelevant and immaterial. It is hardly necessary to observe that it is also incompetent, since it is highly argumentative and based entirely on conclusions made up conclusions of the witnesses, who have furthermore already made up their minds on the grounds that the accused is guilty. Another thing, the prosecution must prove their case to the hilt. It is not enough to show, even if they could, that there are mistakes in the Book of Mormon, for all humans make mistakes. What they must explain is how the author of the book happened to get so many things right. 80-odd years of zealous searching by the Palestinian Exploration Fund have brought to light little or nothing proving the Exodus. To this day, the story of Saul, David, Solomon, or even their existence, there is no trace whatsoever out of Palestine. Edit. I'm doing an edit. Since this time, this book was written in 1950s, there has been a little bit, well, a heck of a lot more archaeology done in the Middle East. And there have finally been different seals and coins that point to, I can't remember if it was David or Solomon. There may be a little bit out there, like one coin or one seal here or there, because, they keep digging down in Jerusalem. It's an old city, and there's lots of stuff. I don't know how much, but since this book was written, you may want to check up on that. There is some. But, as he is saying, let's continue with it. So, it's nothing against him. It's just time has come, and a few things have actually made their way into museums in Israel. You can debate over that if you want. I'm sure that's going to be a rabbit hole in and of itself. But, anyways, at the time of this being written, there was nothing about the existence of David and Solomon or the Exodus outside of Palestine. Yet this shortage of evidence by no means disproves the Bible. We should not have been disappointed or surprised to find all the records completely silent on matters relevant to the Book of Mormon. Yet they have been far from that. If a man makes a mistake in solving a very complex mathematical problem, that proves nothing as to his ability as a mathematician, for the greatest makes slips. But if he shows a correct solution for the problem, it is impossible to explain away his success as an accident. And we must recognize him, whoever he is, as a bona fide mathematician. So it is with the author, for example, let me show you. This is something that I learned, doing mathematics and stuff and physics for my degree, even though I don't get to use them. A Euler was tasked with all his classmates to do busy work for mathematics, which was to add the numbers 1 to 100. Just add them. And most kids started on the Bruce Fort method of 1 plus 2 plus 3, or listing them out and doing subtotals and then adding the totals, which was all still a brute force method. Euler noticed a pattern. and he found it to be exceedingly fast, because he finished this within 5 minutes, and his teacher said, "What? This can't be right. Do it again." And then he proved to him, no, it's right. He noticed, first of all, the numbers from 1 to 100, that, well, if you put the 100 to the side, 1 and 99 make 100. And then 2 and 98 make 100. So half of 99 is going to be 49 and a half. So you can have 49 numbers, that those two numbers that match on either side of 50, that will add up to 100. So you have 50 100s in total, because you have the 49 from 1 to 90, 1 and 99, 2 and 98, down to the center of 50. So all of that is 100s as well. So plus the 100 you set to the side makes 50 100s. So that means 5,000. And then you have the center number left over, which is 50. So 5,050. There's your answer. Explained in less than 5 minutes. And he did this. And he did not do it in the traditional brute force method of just 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. He went on to be a really great mathematician. And so, in the same way, there are, every once in a while, like lightning in a bottle, there are these mathematical problems that just sit out there for a very long time. Every once in a while. Very, 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 very few times. But there has been amateur mathematicians that solve those lingering mathematical problems that have been out there for decades, sometimes centuries. And just like he says, in the end, it doesn't matter if they've made their life out of mathematics or they do it as a hobby. In the end, they're the ones who solve the problem. So, in the same way, so it is with the author of 1st Nephi. If we could find mistakes in his work, we could readily explain and forgive them. But when he keeps coming up with the right answer, time after time, we can only accept his own explanation of how he does it. How did Euler figure it out? Well, here's the proof. How did Joseph Smith figure all this out? Well, here's what I did. One significant aspect of the story of Lehi in the desert must not be overlooked. It is wholly, from the beginning to an end, a history of the old world. There is in it not so much as a hint of the noble red man. Nothing in it ever betrays the slightest suspicion that the drama going to the end of the new world, going to end in the new world, Lehi's people thought that they had found their promised land in Bountiful by the sea, and they were horribly upset when Nephi, who himself had thought the project impossible, see 1 Nephi 17, 8-9, undertook by special instruction to build a ship. From what Oriental romance, then, was the books of 1 Nephi stolen? Compare it with any attempts to seize the letter and the spirit of the glamorous East from the Voltaire and Grillparzer, nay, with the soberest Oriental histories of the time, and it will immediately become apparent how unreal, extravagant, overdone, and stereotyped they all are, and how scrupulously Nephi has avoided all the pitfalls into which even the best scholars were sure to fall. There is no point at all to the question who wrote the Book of Mormon. It would have been quite as impossible for the most learned man alive in 1830 to have written the book as it was for Joseph Smith, and whoever would account for the Book of Mormon by any theory suggested so far, save one, must completely rule out the first 40 pages. Jonah Barnes uses that parable about the diamond. I think he must have read this and it left an impression on him, because dang, it still rings true. It's the same thing with the Book of Abraham. You know, when you compare it to the Apocrypha and other things like that, the proof is in the pudding, the Abrahamic pudding. In this case, we still have the diamond of the Book of Mormon. It's still there, and we can test it every time we read it. Oh God, I'm always so energized when I read the Book of Mormon. I love how, because Mormon was the editor, and he narrowed it all down to some of the most important things, I mean, frankly, there was three main editors. If we want to talk about that, well, you could say four if you add in a divine one, but the three that originally came to mind there was Mormon, who took all the records and put it down to not only the Book of Mormon that we have, but also the small plates of Nephi that would help at least a little bit with the missing half of the Book of Mormon. So there was Mormon himself as chief editor. Moroni, his son, which helped with the Book of Ether near the end, and some of the very last pages, and some very important stuff right at the end of the Book of Mormon. And then, in a way, Joseph Smith, but he was, again, mostly just trying to translate, meaning to get from one form to another what God wanted. And how you want to debate about, go for it, whatever. But the idea is that's a very, very few hands, thankfully. And that means that it's, you could make an argument that the Book of Mormon had a whole bunch of more editors because it was all the authors that were contributing, and then Mormon just abridged it, put it together, and etc. So he was probably just copying the actual records, because the writing style changes between the different authors. And so because of that, you have all the different narrators in their own thing, and Mormon is just quoting them, or then he cuts it down and abridges it. And you see that at times, but that's still very, very few. It goes straight from the original records or the records that were kept to him being the main editor, Mormon being the main editor, and then it's an incredible, incredible process. And when you actually dig in, I'm sorry, the guy who said that he decided to quote the atheist guy who decided to quote Mark Twain saying it was chloroform in print, and he thought it was boring and stupid and all that. I'm grateful he had a go of it. I am. I mean, he actually read it. I find it astonishing that he found a chloroform in print. I don't know. Is it just because I have no problem? I have read really boring books for my job and in college. I mean, tear your eyes out boring. When I did a class because I was looking into being an accountant, because I'm like, oh, that gotta make good money. And then I after taking like one semester of accounting classes, I realized, crap, if I go down this path, I'm going to be paid I'm going to have to pay a crap ton of money to become an accountant, to be paid when I'm already being paid. It's just like, no, you get grand money as an accountant when you get into the higher echelons and you're taking care of the books of like entire companies and you're doing forensic auditing and things like that. And yeah, I'll tell you something. Learning the specifics and the rules behind taxes is dry and dull. When I had to sit there and stand up and walk around, learning regulation books for finances, going through regulations books, cover to cover, I was walking to prevent myself from falling asleep and to focus so my mind wouldn't wander. I was walking while reading and reading aloud, so that way I couldn't sit here and have my eyes go over the page and my mind be somewhere else. So that way I had everything that I could to get through something that dry and dull. I've read the book, What is Mathematics?, which is actually really cool. Most mathematics that everyone does is like on the first 2 pages. Well, first 4 pages. And the rest of the What is Mathematics book is all sorts of different fields of mathematics that most people don't even explore, including different types of infinities and topographical mathematics and all this other stuff. It's way, way cool. And I've read that from cover to cover. I read the 1910 Boy Scout manual because I'm like, oh, they made a reproduction. Dude, I need to see what's in here. And it was actually really cool. So, pure information. Oh, what was another extremely boring one? There was one about the Black Death that had a crap ton of statistics and place names. Like, it's It's, you know how bad history teachers in fiction, like in Harry Potter, for example, in Harry Potter, the history teacher was going over just names and dates and places, and he was so dull that when he died, his ghost got up and continued to teach the class as if nothing had happened because he had just gotten into that method and routine so much. And, that kind of thing. It reminded me of that because the information in between all the statistics was actually really fascinating. The unfortunate thing is the presentation of it being just, here's this place name, here's these dates, and here's these death statistics of the Black Plague sweeping through that area. It was just like, it could have done with graphical representations of maps and dates and things like that. It would have made it 1,000 times shorter and a lot more potent and cool. And you could have gotten to the narrative about how the Black Plague sweeping through Europe changed everything economically and socially, which was the eventual point of it, which did make it eventually cool. So, I know boring is my point. I know what it means to have chloroform in print because I've read that kind of stuff. And the Book of Mormon ain't that. So it makes me wonder, how in the world did he come up with that? And it's mind-boggling to me because, I don't know, is it maybe because I put enough effort into reading things that are hard, that when I read other things that genuinely are actually really cool, but they're just old, they still come alive. Maybe I grew up reading the scriptures, and so the scriptural language doesn't get in the way. Like, one of the criticisms that Mark Twain says, it was all the, and it came to pass, was repeated so many times, he became annoyed with it. Like, it infuriated him. And I find that unfortunate, because it's like, really? Really? This is good, amazing stuff. I don't know. And the reason I focus on this is mainly because I sit here and I look at my children and I go, what do they perceive? Like, it's honestly odd, because how do they perceive things is a question that is something that haunts me, because I want them to have the same strength of testimony that I do. I want them to be able to take any speed bumps in their spiritual journey in stride and sit there and say, well, wait, no, I know this, and I know this, and I know this. And more importantly, if they at least heard it from me, they'll be able to go, wait a minute, I heard my dad talk about this, and then they look it up, and then they're like, oh yeah, now I know it for myself. And I also want my kids to be able to dig up this information for themselves. Because I think too often we eventually hit these spiritual plateaus where, yeah, we're going to church, we're reading our scriptures, we're doing the come follow me, we may even go above and beyond and do our ministering with actual intent, which is pretty hard. Most people are like, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Okay, good. I wish that, or they go to the temple often or things like that. But we reach this plateau and we feel a spiritual stagnation. Or we turn it into being checkmark members, where it's like, check, I did that, check, I did that, check that, I did that, instead of really turning our hearts towards God and trying to just have the Spirit in our life. I fear that they would turn into that and eventually fall away because they just don't fill in those spiritual gaps, so that they don't orient their compass towards God spiritually, which is the point of having the check marks, is that, hey, let's shake up this compass and make sure it turns us towards Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ and doing what's right. I worry that there's too many members of the church that do that. They don't open enough channels to try and ask God, where can I do better? Where can I serve? How can I forward the work? We're to consecrate our lives and our times and talents and efforts to building up His kingdom. And how do you do that? For me, I'm grateful I'm in the middle of things. I have children that I get to teach. I've got uh, videos I can read. But as time goes on, I'll have to find different ways of serving. It's important. We all have different spots that we're in. And that's my hope, is that we fill in the gaps. We fill in the places. We get the Spirit with us. So that way we don't fall away. We don't become stagnant. We don't become bitter. We don't start to look at the world and go, well, it's not that bad. And then start to go, well, do I really need to do all this stuff the church says? That we find the principles and ignore the stuff that doesn't matter and focus on that which does. I hope more than anything that we get those kind of perspectives. That's why I love doing this. That's why I'm so exasperated when people don't see what I see, because I'm like, how do you not see this? This is so cool. And then they're like, whoa, dude. But it is. It's just that cool. You don't understand. Hopefully, with what little I do, others can start to understand. And most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day. My dad, just to plug my dad, he's doing a project called Latter-day Scriptures in a Year, and he's on Spotify. And so if for some reason you find yourself lacking in just having more spiritual stuff in your ear, do that. He's trying to kind of chronologically put the Bible and scriptures together so you can read them in order and as they go and see what's going on along these time frames. And he's doing a wonderful job. They tend to be about 30 minutes to an hour. He adds in information about here's where you can look on the maps and here's these different places. But mostly it is just the scriptures. And it's just, he does such a good job. And I love how he ends it. He says, don't be just hearers of the word, but be doers also. And it's so true. And it's so encouraging to hear that from him. And for me, this is why I like signing off with God be with you. Because what better way to remember to have the rest of your day be influenced by God. So may God be with you.